Well then, it's been a long time since I've made one of these videos. I wasn't particularly interested in 0.4. I'm not particularly interested in the fantasy of playing a druid, and mechanically speaking, I felt it was quite insular. I couldn't really find a slot for the different new skills that you got with druid, and using them on a different character, or the ascendancies and how all of those play together. So I just kind of ended up skipping on the league. I did try a couple funky concepts, and they didn't go so well, but it was just like one or two characters, and yeah. So nothing remarkable, and here we are with 0.5. Now this character isn't something like mind-blowing, but it is quite quirky and interesting, and it does function, so there's a few things to note out, which is why I'm making this video. I don't really play minion builds, so I wasn't very interested in the Spirit Walker, and it's a big shame that we didn't get any new character with skills and other ascendancies to test out. But we did get the Martial Artist, and I was pretty interested in the whole hollow form that you can get through the ascendancy. Ever since the game launched, I've been wanting to find a reason to play a monk using a mace, but there really was no justification until now. And is there really a justification? Because, like, this is pretty interesting. We're using Stampede and we're just like mowing down mobs from afar while channeling. But how does it compare with Whirling Assault, which I believe is which everybody else is using this ascendancy with? And it's for good reason. So I don't know, like, this might have some upsides compared to Whirling Assault. I haven't looked closely. If it does, I'm sure it comes with multiple downsides, and for all I know, it could just be all downsides. But regardless, I'm able to play a monk with a mace, which is new and exciting to me. And I got it to work to a decent degree, so I'm quite content with how the character plays out. The only downside being that visual clarity isn't at its best, notably. And that in order to channel this skill throughout the map, you're hampering your movement speed, even though we have invested into it through the passive tree. But it also comes at a cost, physically speaking, where you're pressing down the button with your, in my case, my index finger as I'm moving around. And this isn't too bad, but when you go on a play session of multiple hours, that's multiple hours of your finger exerting force on your mouse. So it does get to wear down on your body a little bit. What I'm getting at is that it's a little bit tiresome to play for extended sessions, but if you're just playing a little bit here and there, then yeah, it's more than fine. And yeah, as you see, like, the coverage is pretty decent. Stampede does clear a fair amount of space ahead of you, so it's even quite safe in that regards. But even if you take that out of the picture, the defensive layering in this character is surprisingly decent. It might not be like crazy tanky, but it's pretty tanky enough, and it's got some mechanics that are interwebbed quite efficiently. But I'll go over all of that when we go on the character analysis and skills, passive tree, so forth. For now, I think we'll just head on over to the boss. And regarding alternatives to using Stampede, there is only one that I would recommend. I'm not exactly sure if I would say it's better, but it does solve a couple issues. It does come at a cost, quite literally, since playing with Sunder implies a higher mana cost to sustain if you're channeling. And the channeling costs are quite extensive with how this character is built, so even now I'm spamming my mana flask every so often to keep up with my channeling. So you would have to solve for the mana costs if you choose to go with Sunder. I guess I can probably just swap to Sunder here so you get a more fair comparison. And I'll swap back before the boss fight. Forget if I had to change support gems, but yeah, this is what Sunder feels like. You just have to like tap a couple times rather than constantly squeeze. And it's got the benefit that, like Stampede, you have to have the copies run out and then swing, and then when they swing they generate shockwaves backwards, and that's where the big damage comes. So there's a little bit of a wind up to your damage, whereas Sunder is just more immediate. You just see your copies leap up, they leap down, then the huge shockwave just like immediately deals the brunt of the damage. So it does feel a lot smoother. But as I said, the mana cost is more intensive, and when it comes to single target, it's, I don't know, it's quite worse, I would say. It's substantially worse. I myself am not a good, I'm not a big fan or a big proponent of swapping around your gems, so maybe that's the more optimal way to play this, but you won't see me doing that, that's for sure. And I'd rather just stomach it out with Stampede rather than be juggling gems every so often. There's the boss, so let's go back to our original setup. And yeah, you might have seen me do this against some random rare, but for a single target, what you want to do is you want to throw out your big two-handed mace that you have on your weapon swap. And that's going to be linked to Forge Hammer. So then you throw that out, you pop it with your Warcry, and now you're snapshotting the damage from your mace on these fissures. And then when you stampede over them, you'll trigger the fissures, which are going to deal the damage of the mace, but at the speed of your stampede, which is substantially quicker. So that's kind of how we're cheating damage for a single target, and yeah, that side of things is working out quite well. So this is what the damage looks like. Just a Warcry. Pop. Yep. Guy gets stunned. Sometimes you need two fissures. Yeah, I think we need one here. But sometimes you can just do it in a single cycle with the Forge Hammer. So the single target is quite good. The clear is decent, even though visual clarity, as I said, is not as at its best. But, you know, it's good enough. So let's go and review the different things about this character now. Okay, so let's get started with looking at the skills. As such, Hollow Form is the more important one to look over, and the interesting bit is that Hollow Form has a 70% base attack speed, which essentially overrides the attack speed of whatever you've socketed inside of it. In this case, it's Stampede. Stampede doesn't really have an attack speed multiplier. It's not a slow attack, quote-unquote, but the thing is that you'd normally have to wait until you personally perform the whole charge and then you hit. So then by using this, you can send out multiple copies and you're attacking once again at your attack speed, which you normally wouldn't be able to scale with this. Similarly, as I mentioned, you've got Sunder, which has a 40% attack speed. And that's counterbalanced by 653 attack damage. Pretty good damage base. But yeah, suddenly you're attacking at 0.7, and then it becomes more feasible for you to scale your attack speed. As I mentioned previously, that's quite mana intensive. And the other downside to Hollow Form is that when you're comboing for your boss killing setup, then the fissures that you trigger have a cap at the very end where it says no more than every 0.2 seconds, which means you can trigger the fissures 5 times per second. I don't know if you would be able to get Sunder to reach a point where it's triggering 5 times per second, and the mana cost would just be a bit of a headache, which is why I've opted for Stampede instead, which will easily reach that cap since each footstep triggers the fissures. Now, Stampede is a level 42 gem, while Sunder, as well as Forge Hammer, are both level 31 gems. So to get started on this character, I would advise waiting until you have either of these. the small caveat with Forge Hammer is that normally you have to throw out the hammer, and then you have to pick it up before you can throw it once again. So that means its base attack speed is more 35% than it is 70%. However, when you put it onto hollow form, well, the copies throw out the hammer and then they vanish. So then the copies don't have to pick their hammer back up. And if you cast it again, it's a different copy that's throwing a hammer. So you're bypassing that whole phase and you're basically doubling the attack speed. This is quite efficient, the damage is good, and the mana cost is sustainable. But it's hard for it to have enough coverage where it's a good option for mapping. But while you're at the campaign, it's a very solid choice. So yeah, level 31, when you can use Sunder or Forge Hammer, probably Forge Hammer, is when you could get started. Prior to that, your only other option would really be Rolling Slam. And I mean, I personally don't like playing builds I don't want to play so that I can reach a point where I can play the build that I wanted to play. So it's a little bit masochistic, but you can start earlier than that even if you use Rolling Slam, which is fairly decent. It's got a +1 second total attack time, and then you get pretty good damage effectiveness between the two slams. So that's what you would be using if you want to play this sooner. Not the best, but it's good enough. Some other gimmicks regarding Hollow Form are that since it's the copies that are performing the attack, there's a lot of things you can't benefit from, such as life gain on hit, life leech, mana gain on hit. Support gems also become a little bit wonky, because attack speed is a given, and then lightning attunement is a given because it increases your damage per hit, which is good for clear, but more importantly, it gives you a good chunk of lightning damage. So when you're going against your bosses, this will give you a chance to shock them. And if you do shock them, then they will take more damage from your Forge Hammer fissures as well. So these two are go-tos for sure. However, what do you do with your fourth socket? Stampede would be a perfect pairing with Stomping Grounds. But there's this oddity where if you use Stampede yourself, and then Stomping Grounds causes these to generate shockwaves as you take footsteps. Well, if we use Stampede this way, you can see some rings being generated out here. Not the small yellow shockwaves, but the big yellowish, kind of grayish shockwaves that are being generated with each footstep. It's very faint, but you can probably see them. Now, for whatever reason, if Stampede is socketed in hollow form, the copies no longer generate the shockwaves. They only generate the actual footsteps from the actual skill rather than from Stampede. If I walk while I'm channeling, I also do not personally generate those shockwaves. So there's something regarding this support gem that doesn't really work. I guess it's because it causes my footsteps rather than the clones. But yeah, this one doesn't work. You could use mobility, which will increase the movement speed penalty timer, which is something we've invested on the passive tree, so that you can move faster as you're summoning. So that's very good for clear, but it doesn't help with bossing. On that note, you could also increase your AoE with an increased AoE support, which would be good for clear, but no good for bossing. So when it comes down to bossing, then the only options you have are either momentum or close combat. But I'm not 100% sure how either of these work. Momentum states that you gain 40% more damage after moving at least 2 meters during a single use. So there's two questions here. Is this a single use, or if I press and hold, is all of this considered a single use? And if it does count as a single use while I'm channeling, then does it mean that I personally would have to move 2 meters before any of my copies get the buff? Or does that mean that the copies get the buff after they individually move 2 meters. Either way, it's a delayed benefit that doesn't quite work well when it comes to clear, but it could be alright for bossing, perhaps. The other option would be close combat, which is the one I'm using, but it once again raises the question. You deal 30% more damage to enemies within 1 meter of you. Is that enemies that are within 1 meter of the copy? Or is that enemies that are within 1 meter of me? I'm not sure, but it's a little bit clunky. I believe it's 1 meter within the copies, because I've noted that sometimes the best way to approach bosses is to throw your hammer, pop it, and then walk back and kind of gauge your distance where your Stampede copies are slamming right onto them. So maybe that's the way. The second gem that you want to use is a Forge Hammer, of course, which is where you weapon swap into your big hammer, and then you snapshot the fissures, which you will then be popping with all of your slams. So then Forge Hammer converts 100% of physical to fire. As such, you want to support it with fire penetration, elemental damage, ancestrally boosted because you're only generating the Forge Hammer fissures every so often, fire attunement, and Rage Forged. Rage Forged, once again, begets the question of, well, how do I generate rage? Because as it turns out, if you use the rage support, or for that matter, if you get rage on melee hit on jewels or on the passive tree, it's once again the copies that are attacking and not yourself. So you won't be generating rage, but the copies will. The problem is the copy will spawn, perform its attack, gain rage, and then vanish. So then when you summon another copy, it is another copy. That copy will not retain its rage. As such, I have opted to generate my rage through Eternal Rage as a spirit gem, which comes at a hefty 100% spirit cost, which is why spirit is very important to this build, and is the last bit to talk about regarding skills. Similarly, herald effects do not work with hollow form because it's the copies that are generating the kills, not yourself. So you don't get to overkill, nor to trigger Herald of Ice or Herald of Thunder. Those become disabled. The Whirling Assault Quarter Stave builds with hollow form tend to go for this setup where you use Wolfpack to generate wolves every so often, tied to Infernal Legion, so that they die. And then when they die, you gain energy for cast on minion death. Eventually this triggers, it performs Profane Ritual, which requires corpses, and then the corpses will give you power charges, which can then buff your hollow form to generate 2 additional copies. I find this to be overly clunky. It would be nice if there's a reliable way to generate power charges to always have uptime on them, but as it stands, you would only be benefiting your clear setup, where you can generate corpses to get power charges from, and since you're generating copies so quickly, it'll only be one of all of those casts that gets the benefit of power charges before it goes on cooldown. You're attacking fast enough where that's a negligible amount of copies or clear or area coverage. So I believe this setup, for this character at least, is a poor way to spend 90 spirit. The better route would be Eternal Rage to increase your damage, which however is 100 spirit, and you only gain access to at, I forget, it's something like level 62, so well into the endgame. Until you reach the endgame, and if you manage to get enough spirit, then your best options would be Wind Dancer and Ghost Dance. Wind Dancer will improve your evasion, which is your main defensive layering, and Ghost Dance will give you recovery for your energy shield based on your evasion. So if you're using pure evasion gear, where do you get your energy shield from? One big source would be your pair of gloves from your Ascendancy, which I'll go over at a later point. but the other source would be on your accessories. That's where you want to get your energy shield from. So for rings, you're going to want attack damage, resistances, life is good, and if you can get energy shield here, then that would be ideal. Belt is the similar case where you want resistances, life, and energy shield. And then for the amulets, well, you want the spirit, because that's what's going to let you get these auras, which are a huge improvement to your character's defenses and damage. So you want spirit, you want resistances, you want energy shield, and if you can get level of melee skills, then that would be fantastic. Boots are just energy shield, evasion, life, movement speed. And then the remaining slots are your helm, which are life, evasion, resistances, and your body armor, where you want evasion, resistances, and spirit. I think the order of priorities regarding your spirit would be Eternal Rage as most important for better damage, better clear. Then you would probably want Ghost Dance, because the layer of recovery that you get is quite important, as long as you have a decent enough energy shield pool. If not, go with Wind Dancer first, and if you can manage to get both, then you're covered. As far as your weapons go, well, your one-handed mace is the harder one to craft, because you want to get all three of the physical prefixes, being percentage physical, flat physical, and then hybrid percentage physical. But then for suffixes, you also want plus gem level and attack speed, so we're talking about 5 different affixes out of the possible 6. For your two-handed mace, it's a little bit easier just because you can skip out on the attack speed. You're only throwing out the two-handed mace every so often, so it can afford to be slow. So yeah, you can skip on that one mod, but the other 4 would still be the ideal ones. So now we can cover the passive tree. As far as the passive tree comes about, it's worth noting that for the Ascendancy you have to unlock Hollow Form, and then for your second Ascendancy node, you're picking up Way of the Stone Fist. This is what makes the gloves a very interesting itemization option. I do want to preface by saying that Way of the Mountain is not functional for this build, because one would think you get a chance to get Mountain's Teaching on immobilizing an enemy. And since you're dealing physical damage with your Hollow Form in Stampede, you're stunning a lot of mobs. But once again, it's the copies that are stunning the mobs, not yourself. So you will not be getting Mountain's Teachings from this, and you will not be benefiting from the 15% more damage. So yeah, you want to get Way of the Stone Fist, and what this does is it changes your gloves to a different base, which grants you evasion and energy shield based on player level. Not only this, but it transforms all of the prefixes and suffixes from the original gloves into something else. This makes plus flat evasion and plus flat energy shield hybrid a very important modifier to get, because this one will get converted into plus 4 evasion per player level, plus 1 energy shield per player level. This is where you're generating the larger brunt of your energy shield. You can notice that I have 323, however when I unequip them, it goes down to 53. So this pair of gloves alone is generating 300 energy shield for me. Other notable prefixes and suffixes to get would be plus flat physical and plus flat fire or lightning damage. Fire damage would be good to supplement your two-handed hammer with the fissures being converted to fire, and then lightning would be better for a higher chance of shocking. You can get either or. You could maybe make the argument where you can get both of them and then drop the physical damage, because those would be converted into gain as extra. So it'd be gain as extra of either of those 3 damage types. Those are the prefixes that are the more important ones, but what do you want for suffixes? Resistances are always the go-to. Those are the ones I would recommend. However, do keep an eye out that if you do get a valuable plus melee skill suffix, that will turn into quality of skills. And quality of skills is not particularly good on hollow form for this build, so you can probably skip out on that one. Quality is chance to not remove power charges. We are not interacting with this mechanic at all. And quality is additional aftershocks on Stampede. Attack speed would similarly be very valuable here, and you can argue that it's a good one. Perhaps you should include this into your gloves, which gets turned into a chance to gain onslaught. It says on hit, which I believe again goes down the rabbit hole of you yourself not hitting, so you won't be getting onslaught unless it's for single target out of your fissures. Strength turns into area of effect, which would be good for clear, but avoidable for a single target. Leech is still leech, but again, you can't leech because it's the copies that are dealing the damage, not yourself. And then dexterity is just projectiles. So yeah, I think for suffixes you just want triple resistance, you want the defensive plus flat defensive value, and then you want 2 attack damage modifiers on your gloves. The rest of the passive tree is very straightforward. All you're getting is skill speed, attack damage, as much as you can get. Whenever you want to juggle your weapon swap points, you're skimping out on the attack speed nodes and putting those into your one-handed mace setup, because that's the one that's attacking quickly. To counterbalance the points that you're saving up by doing so, then you're getting elemental damage for the two-handed mace for the fissures. Other nodes that you're using exclusively on your single target would be the ones with reduced movement speed penalty, which I've chosen to invest heavily so that I can just feel more comfortable while attacking, while moving, while playing the game. The main clusters for that stat would be here, here, and right here. So yeah, very straightforward tree. Notable point regarding starting with this character is reaching Dance with Death, which will give you a substantial skill speed multiplier while you have an empty hand and a one-handed mace. And then for defensive measures, you're just getting evasion and deflection rating, which there's a lot of right here, right there. There's a little bit more over here. There's some more scattered about. So if I were to push this character further on, I would basically just be getting more deflection rating where I've highlighted. There's a few other attack damage nodes here and there. Not as efficient ones, but you can still get a few more. And there's a few more attack speed nodes as well, there and there. But yeah, this character feels more or less done, which is why I'm making this video now, and choosing to probably leave it there. I know we have the whole, what's it called? Kulguran runes, maybe? I forget. But the whole league system where you get runes and you can get new skills through those runes. Much like the unique items and a lot of the endgame meta crafting stuff, I'm choosing to opt out of all of it because I don't like the sensation where I've played my character through the campaign, I've hit the endgame, and only now am I getting to use these new skills. Not only that, but I don't have the freedom of picking the skills that I want. I have to go through this like gacha lottery system to unlock the skills that I want, maybe. And that just feels terrible to me, so I'd rather just forget about it and play with the skills that I can more reliably, selectively pick from. And yeah, I think that'll do it for me, and I have a couple ideas for other builds to test out, but they're not revolutionary and they're not very interesting, so I might not be making a whole lot of videos in the nearby future. If I do, I might also be updating previous builds, namely the Titan ones, which would be the Poison plus blood chain explosions, the exploding palm titan, which is probably my favorite from the bunch, and then the armor explosion Herald of Plague. But yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying 0.5 and that you're having a very lovely time. So yeah, take care of yourselves and I'll be seeing you around.